Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody, coast to coast. This Week in America. Jerald Brown, author of Key to Biblical Doctrine, asks, if we miss everything else, what is the one concept, the one rule that God wants us to know and do above all others? Is this rule simple enough for children as well as adults? How would this one rule affect today's Christians? Jerald Brown became a Christian in 1957 at age 14. At age 16, he decided to never stop learning and growing in the Scriptures and knowledge of God. He entered Trinity Bible College in Chicago in 1960, which is now called Trinity International University in Deerfield, Illinois. Jerry joined the Army Medical Corps in 1963 during the Vietnam War. He served in Germany and Thailand. And in 1970, Jerry returned to college, got his computer science degree. He worked with computers and programming and analysis and writing websites until he retired in 2019. True to his earlier decision, Jerry never stopped learning and growing in Christ. He took religious classes continually and still studies Christian textbooks today. Jerald Brown, the author of Key to Biblical Doctrine, the one key that explains everything else, no longer a secret, is our guest on This Week in America. Jerald, welcome to the program, sir. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Rick. It's very good to be here.
This is such an important message because it's easy to be overwhelmed and confused with the Bible and how to apply it in our daily lives. What is the key to biblical doctrine? That's the title of the book, and it captures our attention. What is the key to biblical doctrine?
The key is what Jesus said. He said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself." And this is the important thing. He said also, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So everything is on that. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That is the key.
I mentioned your background. You started this in 1957, so it's been decades when you...
No.
Yes.
I did not begin the book in 1957. I first published it in 2007, but I began studying the Scriptures and growing spiritually in 1957.
Yes, and when you started this, how did you realize the Scripture was the key to understanding all of the Bible? When did that happen for you?
It came in two steps. First of all, when I read that about, I don't know how many years ago, about 50 years ago maybe, I read that Jesus said, and this is in verse 40 of Matthew 22, verses 36 through 40, he said, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. And I just wondered about that. Could it be possible? Is it true? And I was wondering and meditating and thinking about it. And one day when I was on a trip to Austin, Texas, I was meditating on that, and I prayed, and I said, no, is this true? Is it really right that on those two commandments, everything else is based, everything? And I heard a voice in my mind, and it just said quite loudly, yes, that is exactly true. And so that convinced me.
Jerald Brown is our guest on the program. He's author of the book Key to Biblical Doctrine, the one key that explains everything else, no longer a secret. The book available at Amazon, all of the usual places. A lot of people listening, I'm sure, are going, is this really God's will for everyone? And I'm sure you've had that question before. People will ask, I'm sure that you had that question in the beginning yourself. Is this really God's will for everyone?
Well, I found out, in my opinion, there can be no other different rule for anyone else Jesus taught it, he repeated it, and demonstrated it. The apostles taught it after Jesus. Moses taught it in the Torah. This is the supreme rule for everyone regarding spiritual truth and relationship with God.
Is this commandment of Jesus controversial? Talk about that aspect of it.
Well, the commandment is controversial because people love their church and their church doctrine. If you tell a friend that his church doctrine is wrong, you have just lost a friend. People love their church doctrine more than they love family. Families are split because one of the members has a different church doctrine from another member. So yes, it is controversial every time it conflicts with a church doctrine.
You used homosexuality as an example of how churches misapply the Bible. Does this cause you any problems?
Yes, opposing a church on any doctrine will cause a problem. If I disagree with them on their treatment of homosexuals, they gently exclude me. That is, I may attend church, but may not participate in the organization of the church, such as being an usher or serving on the welcoming committee. Instead of examining the scriptures and correcting or verifying me, they just keep their doctrine. I'm talking now about most evangelical conservative churches.
Yes.
Many liberal churches have already made peace with the gay community, but evangelical churches hold on to their interpretation of the Bible and refuse to admit that they could possibly be wrong in any of their doctrines.
How frustrating is that for you when you see that that very rigid view that they have, and apparently in many cases really don't want to even discuss it?
Would you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, what is it like when you see that rigid quality of those statements, and in some cases not even willing to discuss it? How difficult is that for you and for many people to understand?
Yes, well, for me it is heartbreaking. It is frustrating. It is sad. I'm just so sorry for them. It's sad. It's frustrating. It's irritating. And I just have all these conflicting emotions because I'm so sorry that people are like that, and that they are.
Jerald Brown, our guest on the program, author of the book Key to Biblical Doctrine. The book is receiving rave reviews. It's available wherever you find books. I will send you to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the usual places. Jerald, what do you hope will be the effect on people reading your book? What do you hope the takeaway is when they read Key to Biblical Doctrine?
Well, I have two great hopes on how my book will affect readers. If the reader is an evangelical Christian, I hope the truth of the Bible and the doctrine of Jesus will find a permanent home in his heart or her heart. I want them to correct their beliefs of exclusion and love the homosexual just as they love anyone in their own family. My second great hope is that gay Christians will find security and protection against those in their own family and church homes. I want to give them a scriptural and Christ-centered reason for knowing they are accepted and loved by God. My key verse to gay Christians is that Jesus said in John 6:37, "If anyone comes to me, I will not exclude him for any reason whatsoever."
The book, it's so important and well researched and written by our guest Jerald Brown. The book is Key to Biblical Doctrine. Does Leviticus 18:22 go against your belief that gays should be treated as equal partners in the church?
This is harder to deal with because it requires an explanation. Leviticus 18:22 and chapter 20, verse 13 say the same thing. Do not lie with a man as you do with a woman. That is an abomination. First, understand that the Hebrew word for abomination is to'aba. That means primarily ritually unclean. It goes along with the introductory statement in Leviticus 18, verse 3, after the doings of the land of Egypt wherein you dwell, you shall not do. The context of Leviticus 18:22 and all of chapters 18, 19, and 20. The Bible states plainly that we shall not worship our God as pagans worship their God in a sexual way. I know that sounds foreign to us because it is not part of our culture, but it was part of their culture. And that very thing caused the downfall of ancient Israel and Judah. All of chapter 19 deals with not mixing religious customs. We may not take from another religion what seems good to us and apply it to our worship. Instead, we must keep solely to the way God instructed us. So, in summary, all of Leviticus 18 and 20 is teaching us that we shall not worship God in a sexual way, just as other pagans infertility religions did at that time.
What does the Bible teach about Sodom and Sodomites?
The story of Sodom is in Genesis chapter 19. Many preachers today teach that the citizens of Sodom was destroyed because they tried to rape the angels that were sent to them. However, the angels themselves said they were sent to Sodom in the first place to destroy it. In Genesis chapter 19, verse 13, the angels say, God has sent us to destroy Sodom. Sodom was a doomed city, whether the rape scene occurred or not. Exodus chapter 16, verse 49 tells us what the sin of Sodom was, and it certainly was not homosexuality.
Jerald Brown, our guest, we're talking about his book, Key to Biblical Doctrine, the one key that explains everything else, no longer a secret book available wherever books are sold. Talk about Apostle Paul, his teaching in 1 Corinthians 6, 9, and 10. Talk about that, please.
This is one of the sad things that really breaks my heart, because 1 Corinthians 6, 9, and 10 has been deliberately mistranslated to agree with church doctrine and not what is written by Paul. The two words deliberately mistranslated are melikos and arsenokortos. Those are Greek words. Melikos means soft, weak, or sickly, and it is translated here as effeminate. But not that way anywhere else it is used in the Bible. Arsenokortos is basically an unknown Greek word, but it was understood to mean masturbation from about the year 300 to about 1500. Around that time, the priests understood it condemned them, so they changed it to say homosexuals instead of masturbators. The shameful thing that today's translators have done is to make those two words say or mean homosexuals to agree with church doctrine, although that is not at all what it says or means. If you read the context of 1 Corinthians 6, verses 9 to 10, which is all of 1 Corinthians 6, 1 through 11, you will see the context is not at all about homosexuality. It is about pagan worship of pagan gods in a sexual way. I wrote 2 chapters in my book, Key to Biblical Doctrine, chapters 14 and 15, regarding the treatment of homosexuals in 1 Corinthians 6, verses 9 and 10.
Jerald Brown, our guest, this is such an important book, and it's well written and well researched, Key to Biblical Doctrine. What does the Apostle Paul teach in Romans chapter 1?
I wrote a very long chapter 13, regarding Romans 1, verses 18 through 32. And I recommend that people read the entire chapter. It's going to take me a very long time to explain Romans chapter 1. I would try to be quick right now, though. The common teaching of the theologians is Romans 1, 18 through chapter 2, verse 3 is about how the Gentiles are are cursed by God, and it tells them why. But as you read each verse and each partial verse, it seems to apply to the Jews twice as much as it applies to the Gentiles. Now, I'm not trying to say anything against either Jews or Gentiles, because we are all guilty, but I'm trying to explain that the way the Bible is interpreted and the meaning in Romans chapter 1 is completely different than what is commonly taught. Again, the entire chapter 13, which is a very long chapter, explains it much better than I can do right here over the phone.
And that's in Jerald's book, Key to Biblical Doctrine, the one key that explains everything else, no longer a secret. Book available, Amazon, all of the usual places. A couple minutes left in the program. Another question, what do you think about marriage and divorce based on Matthew 19?
Matthew 19, verses 3 through 12, Jesus said that not everyone can receive his teaching except those to whom it is given. Now, I think if Jesus himself cannot explain it satisfactorily to his disciples, that is a clue as to how difficult this subject is. The topic is not about a marriage between an individual man and an individual woman. It's about the institution of marriage. Jesus said that God created the concept of marriage, and this concept should last as long as humans are on earth. Moses, from God, gave individuals the right to divorce. That is from God. A divorce between a specific couple does not endanger the institution of marriage, but a meaningless marriage and meaningless divorce does endanger the institution of marriage. God does not want us to take marriage or divorce lightly. So we can divorce, but it is something serious that we should take into consideration and not tend to annihilate the whole institution of marriage.
Yes.
In Matthew chapter 22, verse 30, Jesus says that people in heaven do not get married. That means marriage is a temporary condition in a temporary place. It is not going to be eternal.
What has the reaction been like to your book, Key to Biblical Doctrine? What kind of response are you getting?
Well, most of the time, the people say that they are infused and excited about it. A pastor was reading it, and he began to call me Professor Brown until he kept on reading it, and he got to the homosexual part, and that's when I was excluded from the church.
Wow. I just... the book is so powerful and, again, so well done and researched. And I've got a couple minutes left here. Let's talk about the research. How long did you work on this, and how did your faith grow as you were doing the research and preparing to write the book?
How long? It has been such a long time. Let me see. It was first published in 2007. And I worked on it for about 5 years before that. Let me see here. No, I'm sorry. In my mind, I was working on it in the Bible. It was much more than 5 years. It's in 1989 to 1990, from about 1991 until 2007 when I finished the first draft.
That's just amazing, that the research that went into this to make sure that you were presenting everything in an accurate fashion, and you present it so well. Are you working on another book?
Yes, I am, but I'm also updating this book to a third edition, because I learned some new things that I had not known about before. However, the new book I'm working on right now is The Spiritual Walk
How long before that will be available, do you think?
Well, since it took about 20 years.
Okay. Around 2040, I'll give you a call and see how you're doing on that book so we can talk about it. If it has the impact that this one does, it's well worth the wait.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure having you on the program, and let's end the program as we began it because it's so important. Let me re-ask that first question to re-emphasize the content of the program today, and also if you just joined us mid-conversation, what is the key to biblical doctrine?
Jesus gave us the key, and he quoted the Old Testament, the Tanakh, and he said, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God." Old English. Let me put it modern English. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. This is the first and the great commandment. And the second is just like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And this is the key. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Jesus said everything in the Bible is based on these two commandments.
Pretty simple to understand, and the message is so strong in Jerald's book. The book is Key to Biblical Doctrine, the one key that explains everything else, no longer a secret. Jerald Brown, the author, and our guest on the program. Jerald, thank you for being with us on the program. Again, a very important conversation, and I appreciate you being on the program today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rick.
It has been our pleasure. Jerald Brown, the book Key to Biblical Doctrine, book available wherever books are sold, and information on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You can go to Jerald's Amazon website, get information, order the book there as well. Key to Biblical Doctrine, our guest Jerald Brown. You're listening to This Week in America, and we're back on today's program right after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, associate producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, segment producer. Ben Watson, webmaster. Otto Bechet, director of engineering and TV production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, executive producer of This Week in America.